The palace provides proof, who the doctors were, all signed off, everything signed off. And if they can't do that, because we have a right to know that who is closely in the line of succession is entitled to it. And if they can't do that, I'm afraid those children should be removed from the line of succession forthwith.
Time in the history of the monarchy that this has happened. And therefore, we've all been asking, the doctor's name should be made public. You know that they put that outside with the easel, right? And then Harry, if we go by his narrative and it's spare, he says that Meghan Markle went to the hospital, the Portland hospital, and then she humped a ball, that she was put in the bathtub. She was given not one, but 2 epidurals. I am a mom. I have had my child by using an epidural. Doctors will never put you in a bathtub if you have an epidural.
The demand at the center of this controversy is simple. The palace should provide proof, identify the doctors involved, and show who signed everything off. The argument is that if the names of the medical professionals cannot be made public, then serious questions remain about children who are close to the line of succession. Because this had never happened before in the history of the monarchy, many believe the doctors' names should have been publicly disclosed. The issue became even more intense because of the version of events described by Harry himself. According to that account, Meghan Markle went to the Portland hospital, used a birthing ball, spent time in a bathtub, and was given not 1 but 2 epidurals. That description immediately raised doubts among mothers and medical observers alike because they argued that a woman who has had an epidural would not be placed in a bathtub. What may have sounded at first like an ordinary birth story suddenly began to look much less straightforward. Questions started building around Archie's birth in particular. Reports said Meghan was taken to the Portland hospital to deliver Prince Archie of Sussex. The picture presented was one of a calm labor, with Meghan waiting in the hospital while using a birthing ball in a bathtub. Yet what followed seemed, to many, impossible to reconcile with a normal delivery. It was said that within just 2 hours of arriving at the hospital, they were already back at Frogmore Cottage, their residence at the time. That timeline struck commentators and medical observers as highly unlikely. Even in a smooth birth, they argued, 2 hours would not be enough for the baby to be cleaned, the mother to recover, discharge arrangements to be completed, and the family to travel home. The doubts deepened when people considered the claim that a woman who had received 2 epidurals and who was described as having a difficult and later-in-life pregnancy could have left so quickly. This was where royal tradition began to matter. In every royal birth involving children close to the line of succession, there had historically been public confirmation by trusted doctors. Their names were included in the official announcement, and there was some form of independent verification. Yet critics pointed out that the only 2 children for whom this appeared to be missing were Archie and Lily. That omission became the foundation of a much larger argument. Some voices claim that before any child enters the line of succession, the birth should be independently verified and signed off in a way that leaves no room for doubt. In Archie's case, they said, the only confirmed witness was Harry himself, and that did not satisfy those who believed royal protocol existed precisely to prevent uncertainty. The story was made even more explosive by the fact that it came from Harry's own book. The account described a return to Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours of the birth. Critics emphasized that these were not their words but his. They argued that once travel time from the Portland hospital to Frogmore Cottage was considered, the timeline became even harder to accept. If the journey itself could take nearly an hour, then the actual time spent in recovery and departure would have been astonishingly short. This led many to ask why Archie's birth was handled so differently from every comparable royal birth before it. When Archie was born on the 6th of May, 2019, the announcement included the time of birth, the baby's weight, and the hospital name. But the most important detail, according to critics, was missing. The doctor who delivered him was not named. On top of that, there was reportedly no independent witness publicly confirming that the birth had taken place in the expected way. For many observers, this was not a minor oversight but a complete break from royal tradition. Without the doctors' names, independent verification seemed to disappear, leaving the public with only statements from Harry and Meghan themselves. Security protocol also became part of the controversy. Under royal procedure, the moment labor begins, the monarch is supposed to be informed immediately, and the place of birth is meant to go into a full security lockdown. Royal blood, as commentators put it, is protected at every stage. Yet reports suggested these procedures were not followed, and that the Queen may have learned of the birth from the news, rather than directly from Harry and Meghan. The Portland hospital, meanwhile, reportedly refused to provide any information, citing patient privacy. Although that would be standard in ordinary circumstances, critics argued that a royal birth was never treated as an ordinary circumstance. In their view, such births had always involved formal verification because of their constitutional significance. The same questions followed Archie's sister, Lily Diana, whose birth in 2021 took place at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital. This time the setting was different, the country was different, and the distance from royal oversight was much greater. Some believed Harry had chosen a location outside the United Kingdom to keep key details away from public scrutiny. Her birth certificate, which should have settled everything, was described by critics as unusual. They argued that almost no one could point to a publicly verified copy, and efforts to obtain one reportedly failed repeatedly. One person even claimed to have tried 7 times, only to be told the record could not be found, and that perhaps it would be easier to search for it in Santa Barbara, where the child was said to have been born. These failed attempts only fueled more suspicion for those already doubtful. The doctor reportedly linked to Lily's birth, Dr. Melissa, was eventually identified, but instead of the matter becoming clearer at that point, it became stranger. Shortly after the birth, she reportedly closed her entire medical practice with almost no notice. For critics, this was deeply unusual. Delivering a baby connected to a globally famous family would normally be a professional milestone, something a doctor might look back on with pride. Yet here, instead of public recognition or celebration, there was a sudden withdrawal. The fact that her husband was said to run a very popular fertility clinic only added another layer to the speculation. Archie's birth certificate became a separate controversy of its own. At first, it reportedly listed Meghan by her personal name, which seemed entirely normal. Later, however, an amendment was made. Her personal name was removed and replaced with her royal title instead. Though this was described as legally permissible under the Births and Deaths Registration Act of 1953, critics still found it highly unusual. Some saw it as a deliberate move to secure royal recognition for Archie in the official record, ensuring that his royal status could not later be weakened. Others said it may have been no more than an administrative correction. But because so many other details around the birth were already disputed, even a lawful amendment became a source of deeper suspicion. The controversy widened further because critics claimed royal security procedures had been bypassed. According to that view, when a royal woman goes into labor, 2 calls are normally made, one to the palace to inform the monarch, and another to security officials so the location can be secured. Harry's account, however, was taken to suggest that none of this happened. For those who accepted that version, the implication was stark. Either standard royal protocol was ignored, or the official story did not fit the known rules. As time passed, Sussex communications and palace officials were said to have offered little that could resolve the growing uncertainty. Explanations, where they appeared, were criticized as vague, carefully phrased, and impossible to pin down. Instead of closing the matter, they seemed only to create more confusion. Researchers, commentators, and royal watchers kept comparing dates, procedures, announcements, and public records, and the sense that important details were missing only grew stronger. Attention also turned to Meghan's conduct during pregnancy. It was noted that she withdrew from public appearances, limited her exposure, and kept details tightly controlled. Many accepted that pregnancy is personal and that any woman has a right to privacy. Yet others insisted that Meghan was no ordinary private citizen. She had entered one of the most public institutions in the world, and the monarchy, they argued, rests heavily on tradition, transparency, and public accountability. Every major royal birth before hers had followed an established pattern. Because of that, when Meghan did things differently, people began asking why. Her discussion of her mental health made the story more emotionally layered. She spoke openly about feeling unsupported, isolated, and overlooked. Many respected that honesty and believed it took courage. Yet when those feelings were later brought into the Oprah interview, the conversation turned sharply toward Archie. In that interview, Meghan said there had been conversations within the royal family before Archie's birth about what his skin color might be. She described those conversations as painful and hurtful. The interview had an enormous emotional impact and dominated headlines around the world, but some commentators believed certain specific claims in it should have received closer scrutiny. If internal concerns about Archie's appearance were being discussed before his birth, then, in their view, that suggested his identity was already being shaped in highly charged ways before the public ever met him. Some believed the Oprah interview was a powerful exercise in narrative control. They argued that every revelation was carefully timed and every emotional point was placed for maximum effect. The public focused on the emotional force of the interview, while harder questions remained buried underneath the headlines. For critics, one of those questions was why such selective detail was shared so openly in some areas while important specifics surrounding the births remained obscured. The birth announcement itself became a symbol of this concern. It confirmed that Meghan had delivered safely, stated the baby's weight, and said Harry was present, but it did not name a physician, provide independent medical confirmation, or follow the structured formula seen in previous royal births. When critics compared it to the announcement for Prince George, the contrast seemed dramatic. George's birth had been presented with full protocol, named doctors, confirmed hospital details, independent witnesses, and the traditional palace notice displayed publicly. The same had happened with Princess Charlotte. In both cases, the institution left almost no room for doubt. With Archie, critics argued that certainty vanished. Then came the matter of presentation. For generations, royal parents had stepped outside the hospital soon after birth and introduced the newborn to the world. Princess Diana had done it. Kate Middleton had done it 3 times. Those moments were celebrated as open, warm, and deeply human, creating a bridge between the monarchy and the public. But Archie was not presented in that way. Instead of hospital steps, the public met him 2 days later inside St. George's Hall at Windsor Castle, in an environment that was seen as carefully controlled and fully staged. Supporters said Harry and Meghan simply wanted privacy and had every right to introduce their child on their own terms. Critics answered that royal protocol exists for a reason. It is not only ceremonial, but also a mechanism for transparency and trust. Once those protocols are abandoned, they argued, uncertainty rushes in. These questions did not exist in isolation. They became part of a larger pattern that observers believed had defined Harry and Meghan from the beginning. As a couple, they were seen as pushing back against tradition, resisting established rules, and choosing very carefully what to share and what to withhold. That tension between demanding privacy and controlling the public story sat at the heart of much of the controversy around them. In the case of their children's births, it became especially intense. The obstetrician connected to Lily's birth only deepened that feeling. After being linked to such a globally watched event, she did not step forward, speak publicly, or bask in recognition. Instead, she reportedly shut down her practice and disappeared from view. Critics asked why any medical professional would leave behind a thriving career immediately after being associated with such a moment. They saw the silence not as neutrality, but as something meaningful in itself. Historical context was also brought in. It was said that before 1948, there had been legal requirements surrounding royal birth witnessing, but that these were later changed because the practice was seen as undignified in modern times. Even so, the exchange for removing older forms of witness, according to critics, was that all major details would be made public. Not even the Queen, they argued, was exempt from that expectation. The names of doctors and key birth information had traditionally been placed on the palace notice for public assurance. That was why the absence of these details in more recent cases seemed so significant. Portland Hospital's refusal to comment remained another missing piece. Privacy was an understandable legal defense, yet critics insisted that this was not a routine private case, but a birth with constitutional and symbolic importance. Taken together, they saw a pattern: a birth announcement missing critical names, a presentation that broke tradition, a certificate quietly amended, a hospital that would not release information, a doctor who closed her practice, security rules that may have been ignored, and a monarch who was reportedly informed by the media rather than the family itself. Any one of these details by itself might have been explained away. People make personal choices, traditions change, privacy matters. But critics argued that when all of these things appeared together, they formed a pattern too consistent to ignore. What made the matter even more striking, they said, was that Harry and Meghan had never been reluctant to tell their story when it suited them. They gave interviews, wrote books, made documentaries, and spoke publicly about deeply personal parts of their lives. Against that backdrop, the selective silence around the births of their children stood out even more sharply. That is why the question never disappeared. If so much else was open to public retelling, why did these specific details remain so unclear? Royal biographers who had spent decades studying the monarchy and its traditions were said to be left without satisfying answers. The records that should have existed either were not made public or did not appear in the expected form. For an institution built on documentation, precedent, and visible continuity, that absence seemed extraordinary. The monarchy, it was argued, has survived for centuries because it maintained a certain level of public accountability even in its most guarded moments. Every generation understood that birth, marriage, and succession had to be seen, recorded, and verified. Harry and Meghan openly rejected that standard, presenting their privacy choices as acts of protection and self-preservation. Many supported them for that, but critics insisted that the result was a set of unanswered questions that never stopped following them. At the center of it all were Archie and Lily, whose births became some of the most debated in modern royal history, not because anyone questioned their worth, but because the way their arrivals were handled broke so sharply from everything that had come before. And in the absence of full explanations, the debate remained unresolved. For those still watching, the issue came down to a final choice, whether all of this was simply the result of a couple demanding privacy, or whether key parts of the story had still not been told.